Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to this, our latest episode of the Trend Detection podcast. Today's episode is all around customer success management, obviously around the Senseye Predictive Maintenance platform and how we sort of approach this, because it's a very important part of our process of working with customers. And we've got my colleague Peter, who's probably he's been there. Well, he'll explain in a minute how long he's been part of the Senseye team and how long he's been doing this for. But he's, again, probably the perfect person, I'd say, to discuss this with today. So I'll just hand over to you, Peter. It's been a while since you've been on the podcast as well, so welcome back too.
It has been a while. Thanks, Niall. Yeah, it's good to be here. So for the people who don't know me, I've been with Senseye a long time now. I think it's 7 years. In the same title role, although I would say that my role has kind of expanded and contracted as the business has grown. I am the fancy titled Customer Success Manager. So I suppose I'll have to delve into that on this podcast, tell you all about it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it may be a commonly used term, more broadly. Some organisations use it. I guess everyone has their own sort of job titles for certain things. But I guess if we just start, right on the basics, I guess, Peter, with, what is customer success management? I guess for people, from our point of view, I guess we have to say that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it comes down to for an individual customer, what does success look like? And then trying to drive our whole processes through to getting that success, getting the customer happy, using the application, adding more assets, adding more people, and just growing. We start off, historically, we would start off with a relatively small pilot, and then we would try to prove that and then expand across the workshop. And then once we've got across the workshop, we'd expand across the plant and then go site to site. And basically my job never stops until I've taken over the world in whatever organisation we're in.
No, exactly. And I guess just the point, because obviously we've been through this journey of, being, you said 7 years, you've been there from, maybe the earlier days of Senseye to now part of Siemens. How has that role sort of changed, I guess in the past couple of years in particular?
Well, yeah, I think that as we have added more people into the organisation, then the different roles have become a little bit more formalized. So, and we've tried to capture the customer success process through our Senseye Knowledge platform, and each individual stage of the customer engagement now has a defined little bit of it. So, it's really important to, when you start off with a customer, to actually, you sell the product for whatever reason that the customer is buying it for. But if the customer is buying it for a reason that is likely to not actually be achievable because of technology, machines, data, whatever reasons, customer culture, then the customer success team are always going to have a struggle. So in the early stages of our engagement and in the beginning of the Senseye Knowledge platform, that's covered in the scope stage, we want the sales team to actually understand why a customer's buying Senseye for this particular engagement, and then what are the key points of that the sales team will then hand to the delivery team to realize with the customer, and then that gets handed on to the CSM team to run it once everything's kind of going nice and smoothly. So if you start off with some goals can seem reasonable, but when you actually look at them, maybe you're going to have to be lucky to achieve them. So a little example, a customer says, right, I really like the idea of your system. I've got 10 motors to try it on, and I'll give you a 6-month trial, spot 3 potential failures. That will be success. So that sounds, it's quite achievable because the number of assets, the number of failures you've got to detect, what the customer's saying, this is the level that we want to be at. And it sounds really good. But when we use Senseye at scale, I look at the interventions on machines per customer, and generally when we're up and running and it's nice and smooth, they intervene between, say, 2 and maybe 7% of their machines a year to prevent failures. So if you take that and look at, okay, your 10 motors that you want us to trial on, then what is the likelihood of one of those motors having an issue during the 6 months of the trial? And if you look at, okay, we'll say, let's say 10% in a year of those motors might fail, well, that's, potentially one, maybe half of a motor in 6 months, so what's the likelihood? If you've got 10 motors on, what's the likelihood of us seeing success? Now, it might be that you put all 10 motors on and immediately we'll see, well, one is an outlier. It's, hotter, or it's vibrating more, or it uses more current than its peers. And you can say, okay, go and investigate that motor. And then you have success straight away. Like, well, hey, but that's being lucky more than being good. And I would rather, I'd rather be lucky than good, but often we just have to rely on being good at our jobs to achieve success. So with that sort of situation, you'd say to the customer, with those 10 motors, in the last year, how many of them failed? And then when they look into it, it will probably be less than 3. So you say, okay, 3 failures in 6 months, we probably won't detect that. So what will success look like in this initial project? So that would be understanding the machines, onboarding them correctly, get users trained, get the visualization going. Like I say, you do a little bit of fleet analysis to say these are the hottest, these are, whatever. And that could be packaged into success. And then you say, right, at the end of this 6-month period, we've achieved all of that. Let's scale, let's go across to, more machines. And more machines mean you have a higher potential, likelihood of success.
And something you mentioned sort of towards the start of your answer there, Peter, about so you mentioned sales and delivery and customer success. How important is it for those, that handover process? Let's say we want to call it that. How important is that, to customer success?
I think, if I'm really honest, it's less about the handover between the different areas, and it's more about the whole process being aligned to what the customers want, and is that achievable for that particular customer. And then once everything's up and running and smooth, then the handover to CSM should be very easy. Ideally, from a customer success point of view, I like to be involved earlier and as soon as possible within the customer engagement, just because having the relationship with the customer is actually really important, and particularly the users. So, the management buy our system, but the people who make sure that it's going to succeed or fail is actually, the maintainers or the maintenance planners, the people who interact with Senseye on a daily or a weekly basis, and they decide whether to investigate a machine, or whether this is a good alert, or they're not interested in it, and that sort of thing. So those relationships are really important. So I like to get involved early in a deployment, let the delivery team do their thing and on board, and then have a handover with delivery to make sure I understand the machines as well as I need to, and the data that's being monitored, and then it should be nice and easy handover from that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I guess, and then when it comes to, the point when you're engaging with a customer, it's interesting you said about engaging early with the customer. Is that sort of gain more of a, a deeper level of understanding? So it's not sort of I'll describe it as like a cold handover process. It's more of a warm handover. So you're not, so it's not as blunt a handover. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and it's understanding, or trying to understand, why is the customer buying this product, really, and then what machines are they monitoring, and who are the people involved as well. The people in the process add a lot to that process, and it's good to know them.
And I guess by the time you're sort of speaking to customers, Peter, do customers generally understanding about, and you'd hope so by then, but what sort of level of education are you sort of providing at that point? So obviously there's been a level of onboarding, understanding the platform, learning the platform, but then what's the sort of next step on that journey for a customer?
Well, we have a lot of training material that customers can uh, self-serve. What I like to do is make sure the customers really understand how the system works, and if get them to understand, from my point of view, if they understand the difference in the Senseye world between an anomaly and a trend, and how to configure an anomaly, and you do get an anomaly tends to be a spike in the data, but is that spike the early part of a trend going up, and those sorts of things. So trying to get the customer to understand that is really important to me. So if a customer can understand how the system works, at scale, then it helps them to decide, right, what are our next machines, what are the failure mode, what are we likely to monitor, and being able to think about the next steps and the next stages all the time. So yeah, it varies customer to customer, but my the level that I like is to make sure that the customers really understand how the system is working, because then a lot of the time people think AI is magic, and it's not. It's just maths at a big scale. And so if you can look at if a customer says this is too sensitive, maybe we've generated an alert on something, and the customer says, oh, that's too sensitive. So my question to them is, okay, tell me what not too sensitive looks like, because then we can configure the system if need be to be less sensitive. And I've got some customers with some really nasty data that comes in, but they can say, I'm only interested in this if it goes above this value 3 times a month, 10 times a month, or whatever. So we can say, okay, so instead of just running anomaly detection or trend detection, we can pick out bits of that data. We'll ignore the nastiness of it and the fact that it spikes all the time, but it's a case of, if it's 3-4 times in the last month, then I want to know about it. So we can, take what the customer's saying, and then the system just basically pushes it back to them.
Yeah, so what you're saying, I guess, Pete, is that you can really tailor the platform to the customer's sort of unique circumstances. Mm-hmm. Maybe we could, you've explained a little bit there, but maybe we could dive into that topic a little bit more. How else do you sort of do that, I guess?
Yeah, so we touched on sales process and the beginning of our engagement. We cover that under the scope stage, and then we move into the design and the deploy. And the real key thing here is we get enough people in the room, so you'll have the management, whether it's production manager, maintenance managers, maybe the reliability team, and then you'll also have some IT OT people in the room, and then you'll have the machine experts, so the maintainers, and they agree on the machines to actually look at, because you would be surprised how often in a process the management have bought the system to be on certain machines, and then you get the maintainers in the room and like, well, we don't have problems with them, we have problems over there. And so if you buy a system for machines because those machines have data. So in the early stages, I remember a particular project where they had Senseye running on a couple of machines, brand spanking new machines, and they never failed, but all the equipment around them was failing, and so the process kept stopping and starting over the period of a couple of months, not like every day, but over a period of a couple of months. They would say, well, Senseye hasn't detected anything on our machines. And it's like, have those machines failed? Like, well, no, but all the problems are around here. And it's like, well, we're not monitoring around there. So getting the right people in the room to agree on the problem machines is really key. And then you need people who can ideally pull the meaningful data from those machines without having to invest in a lot of expensive sensors. But then you have to have a realization as well that there are certain machines and certain applications where having the right sensors is going to add value quite early on as well. So we always have a bit of a balance between the ideal data and price points and you don't want to shut the machine down to wire it up if you can use maybe wireless sensing, but then wireless sensing won't have quite that level of context that perhaps a wired sensor going into the control systems of the machine as well. So everything from the design and the deploy stage, there's always a balance between ideal data and the cost to the customer on that stage, and the interference with machines and the knowledge of the processes and that sort of thing. So that was quite a long-winded answer, wasn't it? You'll have to clip that one now. But yeah, so the idea though is that decide on the machines, decide on what to measure it, and then onboard it into Senseye.
Yeah. Look, long-winded or detailed? I prefer detailed, so we'll detailed and forensic. That's what we're going for here.
Yeah.
But from what you've been saying as well, I guess it might be interesting to the audience to understand as well. So the approach to supporting, so it's very consultative, if I can say it. And I just wonder what that balance is between that and sort of self-learning, because of course we have customers as well who are very much more hands-on. So maybe you want to talk about that sort of both sides of the coin there.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, the customer. So Senseye is software as a service. We are not consultants. But to get the best out of Senseye, we need to do a little bit of consultancy sometimes. And often when the customers are fully up and running, then I might get an email from someone saying, "Oh, Pete, can you jump on a call? I want to discuss X machine." So I'm like, yeah, okay. So jump on a call, and on the other screen, I'm Googling, what is this machine? And the customers will invariably have the answers to what they want to monitor from that particular machine and how they want to get there. It's just guiding them through that process, I suppose. And I think I saw in one of the sales slides coming out last week that someone had put down, methodology more than technology, which I thought was quite good. So the technology is there, but you need the methodology to choose the machine, choose the data, what are the fault modes that you're trying to monitor for, and then adding all of that into Senseye.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I guess it's something we talk a lot about on the podcast. It's like, there's no point applying technology if you haven't thought of the business problems you're trying to solve, the machines that are causing you the most issues, and that sort of thing. So, and again, for customer success to be successful, in a word, is those things have to be in place, right? And for the customer to be successful, of course.
Yeah, and then from the customer side, you have to have buy-in from senior management all the way through, and you have to have the users have to be able to, if I steal my colleague Tim's line, is like sell the story internally, sell the success internally, because you want the users to shout about all the money that they're saving for their employer, because then the management will likely buy it. If the management don't see the people using the system and how much success they are getting, then it's going to be harder when we come to ask for a renewal. But if the maintenance team say, we saved X million of dollars this year, then the renewal process is quite an easy discussion, or easier.
Yeah, and I guess that's a really interesting point, because you're right, customer success is, there's plenty of metrics. One of the key metrics, obviously, from our point of view, we want to help our customers be successful and then scale to other sites. So how do we enable what you described there, Peter, in terms of providing the information and the return on investment, so our customers can sell Senseye internally, for want of a better phrase?
Yeah. So again, ideally, it's been captured in the scope phase when we are selling Senseye. Why are we selling it? What are the key success criteria there? And then that goes through to the design and deploy stage, where they get a little bit more finalized, and you agree with the customer how you're going to measure these things. And then ideally, when it comes to me, I just sit back and look at the app and like, oh yeah, those KPIs are in. Here you go, Mr. Customer. This is how much money we've saved you. That doesn't always fall through as seamlessly as that, but that's the ideal. You encourage the customers to capture those successes themselves and then to shout about it internally. So, we monitor the application for the customers. We look at, how often they log in, their user feedback. We monitor whether they say that they've prevented a breakdown or they've saved maintenance and that sort of thing. And if the customer's doing that, then it's really easy for us to show the management. And then if the customer's not doing that, then we just have those conversations with them. And sometimes it's a case of, well, we raised an alert here. You said you prevented a breakdown, but I'm not seeing any supporting evidence of that. And you can try and encourage them to produce that supporting evidence, load it into the system, and then shout about it internally. And one of the I've never seen this in an actual contract, but one of the funny things about customers when they buy Senseye is that we like to have what we call like a Senseye champion in different areas, and we try and make that person be the best maintainer in the business. And you'd be surprised how many of these guys then get promoted. It's quite nice. And it's always sad when they get promoted out of using Senseye. It's like, damn, I'm going to miss you, buddy. You were really good. But then, 2-3 years later, they're back in senior management and then they're just spreading the love. So making the maintainer, making the key Senseye people, making them successful, then that just breeds success within the organization. And a lot of what we try to do is enhance that cultural change within an organization. And if you can get people promoted because of it, that makes your job very easy.
Yeah, exactly. I know, we do have maybe ones we can't talk about, unfortunately, in too much detail, but there are definitely examples of where people have been promoted. A Senseye, we can't say it's all because of Senseye, maybe that's a bit too much, but it certainly it plays a key part in the story, right? Because of its success. So I guess success for us means success for customers and vice versa.
Yeah, and then as the customer matures, what's quite interesting is you can see them changing what they call success. So, particular customer I'm thinking of, to begin with, it was all about downtime avoided, but then after a year or so of reducing downtime, they then started saying, okay, now we're going to look at, how much time our maintenance is spending doing certain things, and then we're going to look at are we able to coordinate our maintenance so we're not having to bring, actually I probably shouldn't say this, but bring the maintainers in for overtime at the weekend. Can we plan our maintenance more effectively so we're saving overtime money? And they start to record the amount of time somebody's using Senseye, the amount of maintenance activities done because of that, and also the amount of maintenance that they're able to plan into the non-overtime time of, and then look at the overall cost savings for the solution without actually focusing on the reason they bought it in the first place, which is avoiding downtime.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And just as so we're very quickly coming towards the end of our sort of session. We've packed a lot in already. Well, what I wanted just to sort of touch upon, I guess, before we finish is it's about measuring and tracking customer success. I guess across all of our customers, and how do we use all that information and data and things for improvement, both on our sides and to feed into other customer or new customer projects. Let's say. Yeah,
I mean one of the things that I enjoyed, I think it was just over a year ago, a very mature customer, but they were looking at what assets to onboard next. And so they realized they had half of their conveyors on Senseye and half were not. And they looked at the total maintenance spent on each conveyor individually, but then put them all together. And they were spending 27% less on maintenance on the conveyors that were on Senseye compared to the ones that were not on Senseye. So that's really nice. It's a lovely statistic. So when they go to their management and they say, I want to buy some sensors for these next conveyors, they can say, because I'm going to save 27% for every conveyor I bring online. And that's great for me because I go to another site and say, I can save you nearly 30% of your maintenance cost for every machine you onboard. The more you onboard, the more you save. And when you think about it, it's a good stat, but it's actually not a very fair one, because the half of the conveyors that were actually on Senseye, why did they choose those in the first place? They were the problem ones to begin with. So as well as spending less on the maintenance, they're actually spending way less because they're not having to maintain the problem ones so often as well. So it wasn't a fair comparison, but it's a very nice stat. I can save you 30% of your maintenance costs by having those machines on Senseye.
Yeah,
and that's very specific. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then we've got other customers. Oh, sorry. Go on, Lyle.
No, you go. You go. Sorry, I was interrupting your flow.
Yeah, one of the other customers recently, I found it quite fascinating. They had air filters that were replaced every 500 hours on their machines. And when it was dry season, dusty, those air filters wouldn't last 500 hours. So they started using our system to track when they were being replaced, and they might replace them, say, 2-3 days before the maintenance. But then when the maintenance came around, they would also replace those air filters. So they had air filters that weren't lasting the 20 odd days with these 500 hours. They were replacing them a couple of days early, but then they're replacing the air filters again 2 days later. So they weren't getting the life out of those air filters because they were replacing them after 2 days. And then when it started to rain, you could then see the air filters lasting way longer than the 20 days, but they were still changing out those air filters every 20 days. So they were trying to change their management policy to say, actually, we can change out these filters on predictions. So you can look at it and you can say, okay, I think we're going to get to that next maintenance, so I won't change it now. Or you can say, yeah, we'll change it early, and then you'll have to change it maybe midway between the servicing next time, but it's a lot better than throwing away the air filters. And they were spending $150,000 a year on air filters, and they were potentially using them for maybe half the lifespan over the whole year. So that's a good cost saving there.
Yeah, really powerful examples there. And the one thing I sort of take away from that, it's almost part of your role in, correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost trying to build trust in the system as well. Because obviously, we've got, successful customers already and plenty of examples where we can, but that doesn't guarantee automatic trust of the system in someone's, production line they're responsible for in their plant.
Correct.
Or whatever as well. So is that quite a key, having these,
Definitely.
Because you've got to have trust in order to enable what you just described, the air filters, etc.
Yeah. And also, that's part of the reason why during the scope, design, deploy phase we have those engagements with customers, because one of the things you can't do is cookie cutter a success over here and deploy it over there and expect the same success, because they may not have the same problems. So it's fine if a customer has the same problems, you can use exactly the same solution. But, very early on, a customer was said to be, we've been told to use Senseye. We've been told this shop over there saves like X number of hours of downtime. And we've been told we've got to do that, but we don't have that amount of downtime. So it's like, okay. So where can we help you out? And they would say, well, we change these motors every 6 months because once we had a failure after 7 months. Like, okay, do you ever look at those motors after that 6 months to see whether they're close to the end of their life? They're like, not really. So, okay, well, we'll monitor those motors, and then when you change them out, we can see, does the data change post changing them out, or is it the same? And if the data isn't degrading towards the end of their life, and you're changing them out, then either we're not really measuring the right thing, or you're changing those motors out too soon. So we can then go to a condition-based maintenance where you say, okay, we will leave those motors in place until we start to see signs of degradation, and then you can investigate them. So obviously you save on parts, you save on maintenance activity, and it's better for the environment because you're not wasting anything. So yeah, it's definitely a win-win. But again, you've got to get the relationship and the trust in the system and the understanding as well that the management will say, well, you should be able to avoid X amount of downtime. And the poor maintainers say, but I don't have that amount of downtime. I can't do that.
That's true.
So then what can you do? Yeah.
And that's why it's important KPIs match up with, the project. Yeah, that's interesting. Not the cookie cutter approach, across all, I say automotive facility or whatever, whatever it might be. I know we did say, I said I was concluding earlier, and this always happens on the podcast, and I always think about 5 other questions. So, but if we do conclude now, I'll say if, because I guess just to, sum everything up, Peter, in terms of, what is the key to sort of custom, a successful project? I was going to say customer success management, but essentially what we're looking for is a successful project that's going to scale further. So what would you say, like the 3 key elements of that, let's say?
Oh, the 3. I think, like I say, you need alignment from customer management through to the maintainers, because if the maintainers loving it and the management don't see the value, they're not going to renew. If the managers love it and the maintainers don't want to do it, they're fearful for their jobs, maybe it's going to take over, then perhaps they won't engage with the system. And so it's really hard from the outside to force engagement. You can't do that. You can only try and encourage people. So that's number 1. Number 2, are we trying to track a problem that they actually have? Like I say, if they'd say, yeah, go and save 3 failures out of these 10 motors in the next 6 months, we won't, because they probably won't fail. So it needs, we need to be able to have realistic expectations of the system. Why are you buying it? What are you deploying it on? And then the user engagement. And then the next thing is just, choose the next one. Let's look at those machines. Let's add the next thing. Let's add the next thing, and never stop.
Never stop. And what a way to end on that ominous note. No, thank you, Peter. And yeah, some really interesting. I think, and we've got some other podcasts that dive into some of the themes so I definitely recommend sort of listing some of our other recent episodes as well. But I guess for now, thank you for your time, Peter, and thank you for sharing your sort of expertise and knowledge with everyone. And thank you to everyone for listening, and see you on the next episode.
Woohoo.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, folks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.